Zahara and Becky never expected her entire life to flip in one morning. She had just stepped out of the Uber, exhausted after a long day at a client meeting, when she froze on the pavement. Her suitcases, the same ones she had packed with love for her honeymoon 2 years ago, were sitting outside the apartment door like abandoned trash. The Cape Town breeze carried the scent of the ocean, but all Zahara felt was a sharp sting in her chest. For 8 months, she had been quietly paying the full $5,200 rent. Not because she had to, but because she knew Tumulo's family was struggling. His mother had cried to her, begging for just a little help. Zahara didn't hesitate. She covered rent, groceries, bills, everything. She told no one, not even her friends, because she believed in supporting family with dignity. But Mama Calypso never softened. No matter how much Zahara contributed, she was always treated like an outsider. A stranger. Someone who didn't belong. Every time Zahara entered the room, Mama Calypso's eyes would narrow, her tone sharp, as if Zahara was an intruder living under her roof, even though Zahara was the one paying for that roof. Now, standing there, staring at her bags on the doorstep, the message was clear. They didn't want her inside. They didn't care what she had done. She wasn't family in their eyes. Zahara felt tears blur her vision, but behind them rose something stronger, a quiet, burning determination she didn't even know she had. This moment wasn't just an insult. It was the beginning of something she could not yet name, but it was coming. Zahara hadn't even lifted her suitcases when the apartment door flew open. Mama Calypso appeared with fire in her eyes, hands on her hips, her voice already raised before Zahara could speak. "You lazy girl. Using my son like this. Finally, we are done with you." Her words shot through the hallway like bullets. Zahara stood there stunned. She opened her mouth to explain, to ask what was happening, but before a single word left her lips, Mama Calypso stepped closer and shouted even louder, as if she wanted the entire neighborhood to hear. And unfortunately they did. Doors slowly cracked open. Curtains moved. Neighbors from downstairs leaned over the railing. People were watching, hungry for drama. Zahara felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She tried again, her voice soft, trembling but polite. "Mama, please let me explain. I don't understand why." "Keep quiet." Mama Calypso snapped. "I warned my son. I told him you were not wife material. All you do is take. You think we don't see you? Shame." Zahara felt the words cut deep, especially because they were the opposite of the truth. She had been the one paying for everything. She wanted to tell the neighbors, scream it into the air. "I paid the rent, not you. I fed your family, not you." But her upbringing held her back. She had been raised to respect elders, even when they were cruel. She turned to Tumulo, hoping for support, for at least one sentence to defend her. But he stood behind his mother like a shadow, arms folded, head down, pretending he didn't see the pain on Zahara's face. He didn't look at her. He didn't speak. He just avoided the moment like it was a storm he couldn't survive. Seeing him silent was more painful than anything his mother said. This was the same man who once promised to protect her, cherish her, and stand by her side. Yet now, when she needed him the most, he disappeared into silence. Mama Calypso kept shouting, enjoying the attention. "Take your things and leave. You won't drain this family anymore. My son will not suffer because of you." A neighbor whispered loudly to another, "Eesh, shame. She must have done something terrible." Zahara heard it all. Every whisper, every assumption, every judgment from people who didn't know a single thing about her sacrifices. Her throat tightened, her eyes filled. She grabbed her suitcase handle, her hands shaking. But she didn't scream back. She didn't throw insults. She didn't beg to stay. She simply turned around, walking away slowly, tears rolling down her cheeks with each step. Yet beneath the heartbreak, something stronger was forming, a quiet determination she didn't recognize at first. She was hurting, yes. Humiliated, yes. But broken? No. With every step she took away from that doorstep, she felt a small piece of strength return. They thought they had crushed her, but they had only pushed her toward the truth, and the moment when she would rise again. 8 months before the drama on the doorstep, Zahara's life looked completely different. Back then, she still believed in her marriage, in her husband, and in the idea that families supported one another during hard times. It all began the night Tumulo came home with heavy shoulders and red eyes. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor like it was the end of his world. After a long silence, he finally whispered, "I lost my job today." Zahara remembered the way his voice cracked, how small he sounded. She didn't even hesitate. She wrapped her arms around him and said, "We'll figure it out together." She meant every word. They were a team. Or at least she thought they were. A few days later, Mama Calypso called Zahara privately. Her tone was unusually soft, almost desperate. "My child," she said, "please help us just a little. Temporarily. Until things get better. You know your husband is under pressure. We don't want to lose the apartment." Zahara felt her heart squeeze. She wanted to be a good daughter-in-law, a supportive wife. She wanted peace. So she agreed. At first, she only planned to help for 1 or 2 months. But Tumalo didn't find another job. The bills kept coming. Groceries needed to be bought. The landlord didn't care about family problems. Someone had to take responsibility, and Zahara stepped in without complaining. She took over the full $5,200 rent. She paid for every grocery trip. She handled medical appointments, monthly transport, airtime, electricity, everything. She became the silent backbone of the entire household. And not once did she make anyone feel guilty. She wanted to protect Tumalo's dignity. She wanted to keep the family stable. She even hid the truth from her own friends, brushing off their questions with little jokes like, "You know how family life is." What hurt the most was what she had to sacrifice quietly. Zahara had been saving for years to launch her skincare brand, a dream she carried since university. She had the business plan, the suppliers, the designs, everything ready. But instead of investing in herself, she used that money to keep the household running. Every month she told herself, just a little longer, just until Tumalo gets a job. But months turned into more months, and somehow her help became expected. No one thanked her. No one acknowledged her effort. Mama Calypso would call her into the kitchen and talk about women who know their responsibilities, completely ignoring the fact that Zahara was the one keeping everyone afloat. The worst part, Tumalo never noticed how draining it was. He didn't ask how she was managing. He didn't ask if she needed help. He just sank deeper into silence and left everything to her. Zahara didn't complain, but deep down she wondered when her own dreams would matter again. She didn't know it then, but the same people she was saving would later be the ones to push her out. And only then would she realize the price of loving the wrong people more than herself. The family meeting in Kebra was the moment Zahara finally understood that no matter how much she gave, they would never see her as one of them. It felt strange from the beginning. Mama Calypso had insisted they travel all the way to her sister's house. "Important family matters," she said with a tight smile. Zahara thought maybe it was about Tumalo's job search or finances, something practical. She didn't expect to walk straight into an ambush. The moment she stepped inside, the energy felt heavy. Mama Calypso's sister, Aunt Thandi, sat in the living room with her arms crossed. Two cousins she barely knew were there too, whispering to each other. No one offered her a seat, so she quietly pulled out a chair herself. Tumalo sat beside her, but he looked uncomfortable, eyes staring at the floor like a guilty schoolboy. Then the meeting began. Mama Calypso cleared her throat dramatically. "We called you here because we need to talk about your behavior, Zahara." Her tone was smug, like she had already decided the verdict. Zahara blinked in confusion. "My behavior?" "Yes," Aunt Thandi jumped in. "You act too independent, too strong, always doing things your own way. We don't feel respected." Zahara's heart dropped. Independent? Was that a crime? She was the one carrying the household financially. She was the one sacrificing her dreams. How could her independence be a problem? Mama Calypso leaned forward, voice rising. "A married woman should know her place. You make decisions without asking us. You go to work, travel for your job, come home late. That is not how a proper wife behaves." Zahara tried to stay calm. "I work because our family needs income. I'm doing my best." But instead of appreciating her, the room erupted. A cousin said loudly, "She thinks she's better than us." Another added, "Her attitude is too much. She speaks like she owns everything." Zahara felt the sting of injustice. She had never disrespected them. She had only tried to help. She looked at Tumalo, hoping, begging, for him to step in, to tell the truth, to stand by her side for once. But he didn't. He just sighed and shrugged, his voice barely above a whisper. Maybe they have a point, Zahara. You can be a bit much sometimes." That single sentence broke something inside her. Not because of the insult, but because it confirmed her deepest fear. She was fighting for a man who would never fight for her. Mama Calypso slammed her hand on the table. "We've decided. You must leave our home. Permanently. We don't want this kind of disrespect in our family." Zahara felt her whole body go cold. She looked around the room, at the people she had fed, supported, and protected, and all she saw were judging eyes waiting for her to break. But she didn't cry. Not yet. She stood up slowly, her voice soft but steady. "If that's what you want, fine." No one stopped her. No one apologized. As she walked out of that house in Kebra, she realized something important. This wasn't a family meeting. This was a betrayal meeting. And it would be the last time she let these people decide her worth. Little did they know, their cruelty had just awakened a version of Zahara they were not ready for. Zahara didn't make a scene when she returned from that cruel family meeting. She didn't shout, she didn't argue, and she didn't even ask Tumalo why he let his family disgrace her. Instead, she became quiet, the kind of quiet that comes right before a storm. She packed the rest of her things with calm movements, almost too calm, and walked out without a word. No one stopped her. No one asked where she was going. They assumed she would crawl back eventually. They didn't know Zahara. That same night, she boarded a bus to Johannesburg and moved into her friend Ao's apartment. Ao was the kind of friend everyone prayed for, loud, loving, and fiercely protective. When she opened the door and saw Zahara's red eyes, she didn't ask many questions. She just hugged her tight and said, "Stay as long as you need. We'll figure everything out." Johannesburg felt different from Cape Town. Bigger, faster, brighter. And suddenly it felt full of possibilities. For the first time in months, Zahara breathed without feeling the weight of someone else's expectations on her shoulders. The next morning, she made her decision. She was done paying for people who didn't value her. No more rent. No more groceries. No more carrying a whole family on her back. She simply stopped. But she didn't stop out of revenge. She stopped because she finally realized her kindness was being used as a weapon against her. Ao watched her move around the small apartment with determination. "You're planning something," she said with a smirk. Zahara nodded. "It's time they see who's been keeping that house running." And so the secret plan began. Every evening after work, she sat on Ao's couch with her laptop open. She logged into her bank account and downloaded every transfer she had made in the past 8 months. Rent, groceries, electricity, medical bills, airtime, even the random small amounts she sent when they claimed they were short again. It was all there. Every payment, every sacrifice, all in her name. Then she pulled out the signed lease. Her name was the only one written on it, neat, clear, legally binding. She never mentioned it before, because it didn't matter. Or at least she thought it didn't. Now it mattered more than anything. She collected the receipts from her email. She created a folder titled Evidence. Page after page, document after document, the truth piled up like a mountain. Ao sat beside her, scanning the papers and shaking her head. "And they still called you lazy? These people don't deserve the shoes you walk in." Zahara felt a small fire burning in her chest. Not anger, not bitterness, but clarity. She finally saw everything for what it was. The manipulation, the disrespect, the ungratefulness. With every document she collected, she felt lighter. "And what are you going to do when you show them?" Ao asked. Zahara looked up, her eyes steady. "I'm not going to argue. I'm not going to shout. I'm just going to let the truth speak for itself." The truth bomb was ready. And when it dropped, no one in that household would be able to escape it. It started with a knock that sounded more like an explosion. Mama Calypso barged into Tumulo's room, her face red, eyes blazing, hands shaking with fury. "Why didn't your wife pay the rent?" she screamed, her voice echoing off the walls. Tumulo flinched, shifting uncomfortably on the bed, avoiding eye contact. He didn't have an answer, and she didn't give him time to form one. She promised she would take care of everything. 8 months she's been paying. Now the rent is overdue? How could she do this to us? Mama Calypso continued, pacing like a caged lion, while Tumulo just sat there, silent and helpless. She shook her fists in frustration, muttering about shame and disrespect, blaming Zahara for the first time in front of him, and everyone who might overhear. Meanwhile, Zahara, safe in Johannesburg at Ao's apartment, had no idea the storm was picking up. Her phone rang, lighting up with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello. Zahara, you lazy woman. You haven't paid a single cent this month, and now the landlord is threatening eviction." Mama Calypso's voice screamed through the line, filled with rage and panic. "Do you know what you've done? If you don't send the money now, we will lose the apartment, and your husband will regret ever marrying you." Zahara stayed calm. She took a deep breath, letting the storm of Mama Calypso's words wash over her without touching her. "Mama Calypso," she said evenly, "I've paid every month for the past 8 months. You know that. Don't lie to me." Mama Calypso shouted. "I've seen the notices. The rent is overdue. You are trying to ruin us." Zahara didn't argue. She knew the truth would speak louder than any yelling ever could. She hung up the phone, her hands steady, her mind sharp. Mama Calypso didn't realize she was no longer the one holding all the power. Then came the legal notice. A plain envelope from the landlord arrived at the apartment. The landlord who had no idea of the family drama, only that the rent hadn't been received for that month. Mama Calypso's panic grew tenfold. She waved the letter at Tumulo like a sword, screaming, "See this? This is your wife's fault. She's thrown us out of our home. She has no respect, no honor." Tumulo tried to calm her, to say something, but she cut him off at every word. The neighbors began whispering, sensing the chaos. It was the first crack in the carefully built facade of Mama Calypso's control. She still believed Zahara owed them everything, but the legal notice, and the growing suspicion in her heart, planted the first seeds of fear. Across the city in Johannesburg, Zahara smiled faintly, looking at her folder of carefully kept receipts and bank statements. She had anticipated this moment. The panic, the screaming, the threats, it was all part of the plan. Mama Calypso and Tumulo were about to learn the hard truth. The woman they thought was weak, submissive, and dependent had been in full control all along. And soon, the tables would turn completely. Zahara didn't rush. She walked into the apartment in Cape Town with quiet confidence, her heels clicking softly on the tiles. The air felt tense the moment she stepped inside. The entire family was gathered in the living room, Mama Calypso pacing like a tiger, Tumalo sitting stiffly on the couch, and a few of the nosy neighbors peeking through the doorway. They all froze when they saw her, unsure whether to be angry, afraid, or both. Zahara didn't speak at first. She didn't need to. She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder, neatly labeled payments, and set it gently on the coffee table. She opened it, letting the weight of the contents do the talking. Every page was a record of 8 months of bank transfers, receipts, and invoices, all showing the $5,200 rent and groceries, all paid directly from her account. The room went silent. Mama Calypso's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Her eyes widened, her hands trembling slightly as she reached toward the folder, as if she wanted to touch it to make it disappear. Tumalo's face drained of color, the pale tone of guilt and shock spreading across his features. He couldn't speak. He had been silent before, but now, confronted with proof, even his excuses melted into thin air. Zahara looked at him for the first time, her gaze steady. "Do you see this?" she asked softly, though it carried a weight that filled the room. 8 months. Every single month. Paid from my account. I've kept the family afloat while being accused of laziness, disrespect, and selfishness. Mama Calypso opened her mouth again, trying to form words, but none came out. She pointed shakily at the folder, her voice almost a whisper. "But, I thought." Zahara shook her head. "You assumed. You judged without knowing the truth. You accused me while I carried everything on my shoulders, and you let the man I trusted stay silent while you humiliated me." Neighbors in the hallway had stopped whispering. Some leaned closer, others held their mouths in disbelief. The story they had believed, that Zahara was lazy, that she was taking advantage of Tumalo's family, had just been shattered by paper, numbers, and receipts. Tumalo finally tried to speak, his voice small, uncertain. "Zahara, I." She raised a hand gently, cutting him off. "Don't. Your silence has already said enough." Mama Calypso sank back into a chair, frozen, unable to meet Zahara's eyes. Every insult, every accusation she had thrown now seemed hollow. The truth had landed like a hammer, heavy and undeniable. Zahara closed the folder slowly, the sound echoing through the room. "I trusted you all with my kindness," she said quietly, "and you repaid it with disrespect. I hope you understand now who was really supporting this household." She turned on her heel, walked toward the door, and paused for a moment. "I'll be taking my life back from here, and this time no one will stop me." With that, she left the room, leaving behind a stunned family, a pale husband, and a neighborhood buzzing with whispers. For the first time in months, Zahara felt lighter, freer, unstoppable. The moment the landlord walked into the building, Mama Calypso's confident posture faltered. She had stormed down to his office, clutching rent receipts, shouting about Zahara's refusal to pay. The neighbors watched, whispering behind their hands, curious about the commotion. The apartment block, usually quiet in the afternoons, now hummed with tension. Zahara arrived with Ao quietly at her side. She didn't need to yell or plead. The landlord greeted her politely, then paused when he saw the folder in her hand. "I see you've brought all the documents," he said. "Yes," Zahara replied, her voice calm, steady, and full of control. "I just want the truth to be clear." The landlord opened his register and checked the lease. He scanned the files, verifying the bank transfers and payment confirmations. "Everything is in order," he said finally. "Ms. Mbeki, you are the only registered tenant on this property. Legally, the apartment is yours. No one else, not your husband, not his mother, has the right to demand you leave." Mama Calypso froze in the doorway, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Tumalo's face went even paler, and he looked like he had just swallowed a bitter truth he couldn't spit out. The neighbors began murmuring, slowly piecing together the story from the landlord's word. "Did you hear that?" one neighbor whispered. "She's the tenant all this time?" Another shook her head. "All this fighting, all the shouting, and she's been paying everything herself?" Mama Calypso's voice trembled, barely audible. "But, I thought." The landlord held up his hand. "No assumptions here. The law is clear. The apartment belongs to Ms. Mbeki. Any attempt to remove her without her consent would be considered illegal." A hush fell over the building. People peeked from their windows and doorways, realizing that the woman they had seen dragged and shamed on the doorstep was not the villain they had assumed. The truth spread like wildfire, carried in whispers, nods, and shocked expressions. Zahara stood tall, holding the folder against her chest. She could feel the weight of months of silent struggle lifting. Every unkind word, every accusation, every moment of humiliation was now exposed for what it really was: false, unjust, and unearned. Mama Calypso's hands shook as she folded them over her chest, her face drained of color. Tumalo swallowed, his pride and excuses dissolved under the undeniable proof of Zahara's strength and integrity. Even the neighbors who had doubted her now looked at her with newfound respect, murmuring about how unfairly she had been treated. The landlord nodded at Zahara. "I recommend keeping all these documents. They prove your case and protect your rights. You've handled everything correctly." Zahara smiled faintly, feeling a sense of calm power wash over her. The truth was out. Everyone could see it. For the first time, she wasn't just fighting in silence. She was standing in the open, fully backed by the law, fully untouchable by those who had tried to control her. As whispers spread through the hallways and staircases of the building, Zahara realized something important. Justice didn't need shouting. It didn't need anger. Sometimes it just needed truth, quiet, undeniable, and unstoppable. Zahara had always imagined a future with Tumalo by her side, building a life together, supporting each other's dream. But after the landlord confirmed the truth, after the humiliation, the lies, and the silence, she realized something painful yet freeing. Tumalo was never going to stand up for her. He admitted it quietly one evening, sitting across from her in a small cafe, his voice barely audible. I should have defended you," he said, rubbing the back of his neck nervously. "But I didn't. I let my mother treat you badly. I was scared. I'm sorry." Zahara stared at him for a long moment. Her heart ached not because of anger, but because of disappointment. Love alone wasn't enough. Respect mattered. Support mattered. And he had given neither when she needed it the most. She felt a strange clarity settle inside her. She had spent months carrying the weight of an ungrateful family and a husband who refused to fight for her. It was time to fight for herself. "I can't do this anymore, Tumalo," she said, her voice firm but calm. "I loved you. I believed in us. But I won't stay in a marriage where my worth is ignored, where my sacrifices are invisible. I deserve better." He nodded, tears in his eyes, finally understanding that her words were final. Zahara walked away from that chapter of her life with no regrets, only a sense of liberation. The very next week, she signed a new lease for a luxury apartment in Santon, a place she had always dreamed of living. Bright, modern, and all hers, it was a symbol of her independence. No one could control her here, no one could diminish her. The apartment felt like freedom made tangible, a fresh start built on her own hard work, not on anyone else's expectations or approval. With space and peace, Zahara finally turned her attention back to her long-postponed dream, launching her skincare brand. She poured her heart into it, developing products she had imagined for years, and shared her journey on social media. Her authenticity and hard work attracted attention quickly. Followers praised her transparency, her resilience, and the products themselves, which were carefully designed for all skin types. Orders started pouring in. She felt proud, not just for the success, but because it was hers, entirely hers. Months later, Zahara looked around her Santon apartment, sunlight streaming through the windows, products neatly arranged on shelves, emails and social media notifications buzzing with excitement. She had built her life the way she wanted, free from judgment, free from disrespect. The woman who had been kicked out, humiliated, and silenced was now thriving. Zahara smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The pain she had endured had been transformed into strength. Every insult, every tear, every sacrifice had led her here. She had lost a husband who couldn't fight for her, but she had gained herself, her freedom, her independence, and her dreams finally realized. In that moment, Zahara understood something profoundly simple and true. Sometimes the end of one story is the perfect beginning of another, one you write entirely on your own terms. Mama Calypso and Tumalo couldn't hide their panic when the reality hit. The apartment in Cape Town, the one they had tried to claim as theirs, was no longer under their control. Without Zahara paying the rent anymore, the landlord had no choice. Notices piled up. Legal warnings followed. Eventually, they were forced to pack their things and leave, shuffling out with heavy hearts and embarrassed faces. The neighbors watched quietly, some nodding in understanding, others shaking their heads at the family's downfall. Meanwhile, Zahara's life was soaring in ways she had only dreamed of. In Santon, her new apartment was a sanctuary, bright, peaceful, and fully hers. Her skincare brand was growing fast, with customers praising not just the products but the story of resilience behind. Social media buzzed with her journey, and people admired her for standing up, for claiming her worth, for transforming betrayal into power. Emotionally, she felt lighter than ever. No more humiliation, no more silent sacrifices, no more feeling invisible in her own life. She laughed freely, surrounded by friends like Ao who had always believed in her, and even found new mentors and collaborators who encouraged her to reach higher. Financially, she was independent, secure, and proud. Every payment she had once made to prop up a family that didn't appreciate her now felt like the training she needed to succeed on her own terms. Standing by her window one evening, Watching the city lights of Santun sparkle, Zahara reflected on everything that had happened. She smiled softly, a sense of deep satisfaction washing over her. When they kicked me out, she thought, they removed me from the place that held me back. They didn't know they pushed me into my freedom. And in that freedom, Zahara finally found herself, whole, strong, unstoppable, and ready for everything life had waiting.